The dangers of LARPing are a lot more significant than we think. I think that in today's society, LARPing is such a big thing. Another word for it can be like fake it till you make it, or, just like do this and, maybe you'll live the lifestyle and become true. And I mean, maybe there's some truth to that. I mean, fake it till you make it is not necessarily the craziest thing to happen because there's been so many people who have faked it till they made it and they trusted the process and they stayed committed even though they had like no idea what they were doing. I mean, for example, there's this creator named Caleb Shaw, and there was another creator who posted about him who when he posted a video about talking about being a director, and he got like 30,000 views, and it got a lot of attention because he hit that specific audience about people wanting to become film directors, and I watched that video specifically. But what that post highlighted was the fact about LARPing. You know, he was talking about in his video about being a film director and how he wanted to direct all these short films and make a feature film. But then the other guy pointed out how he's only released like one or two short films in the past like 2 years. And it's not to like judge judge Caleb Shaw about what he's doing and be like, "Oh, wow, he said he's going to do this and he's not doing it." Like whatever, okay? Because I think everyone has their own individual path. But what that specific creator pointed out is that maybe Caleb Shaw got comfortable with the attention he was getting. 30K views on that video, maybe that allowed him to become too complacent and be comfortable where he was at. Oh wow, I made this video. I got a good amount of views on it. Okay, well then maybe I can stop or maybe I'll pause. And you know, there's two sides of it because on one side you have every single creator who wants to go and follow their own path and be like, I want to find my own style. I want to find my own path. This is how I'm going to do it and you can't tell me what I'm going to do. But then I thought that kind of constructive criticism was helpful. Just because, some people get too caught up in falling in love with, like, the process, or falling in love with, the results, that they often forget what their actual goal is. In that video, his goal was to become a filmmaker and direct films and become a director. But, you know, and it's not to judge so much. I was just kind of pointing this out. And, just because he released like two short films in the last like 2 or 3 years, doesn't mean that he's not trying to become a director. But it can be tricky because if you fall in love with the views and the feedback you're receiving already, it kind of blinds you to the fact that what was your actual goal? Was your goal to get famous or get attention on the internet, or was your goal to make movies? And I think it's a fine line because if we LARP about something, it can cause us to, believe we're living that lifestyle without living the lifestyle. If you LARP that you want to be a director but then don't do anything about actually becoming a director, it can be extremely harmful because if you say you're going to do something but then never execute with it and then just, pose on the internet and say, "Hey, I'm a film director," it doesn't do yourself much justice, and then it doesn't do your audience much justice either, because if you're telling yourself, I'm going to be the best film director ever, I'm a director and I'm going to direct all these films and I'm so dedicated, and then you have nothing to show for it, well, maybe you'll lose some audience and you'll maybe get people questioning, is this guy really wanting to become a director, or did this guy fall in love with the idea of becoming a director? Because we make so many made up scenarios in our own head, and it's not just about being a director. We make so many imaginary scenarios in our head about how a situation will play out or how it'll work out for us, and in reality that's not true. It won't line up like that every single time. And and it's not just for directing. If you fall in love with the process but then in the middle of the process you get caught up in falling in love with the views or the likes, and maybe he'll shift and be like, oh, I want to be actually a content creator and maybe an influencer and not necessarily a director. I think every single person has their own individual paths, and I can't get it twisted like that. I can't say, well, this guy said he was going to do this but he didn't do it, because it's a lot easier said than done. How many short films do I have to my name? I have zero, absolutely none. But it's just something I wanted to point out. Like the dangers of LARPing is that, yeah, maybe you can LARP till you make it, fake it till you make it, but you have to be careful that in between when you're faking it till you're making it, you kind of have to be, you know, careful, because if you're falling in love with stuff that's outside of your ultimate goal, then it can cause you to become a little bit more, you know, I guess cloudy minded, where it's like, you know, then you can't understand what your real goal was. Like, what was your actual goal in, making these videos, or what was your established goal? What was it? What was the end goal? And, I think that's hard for a lot of creative people because, we have a short attention span, especially with social media, where it's like, oh, well, here's my end goal. So, use an example, filmmaking. I want to be a director, oh, maybe win an Oscar. And so that's your end goal. And when you start at the beginning, it's like a slow, marathon. It's going to take a lot of time, but over time you'll progress and eventually get there, right? But more times than often, and especially for me, somewhere through this line, I'm going to get confused. It might be halfway, it might be right at the beginning, it might be right when I'm at the end. And and that's what's so great about it, because it's so different for every single person. Every single person has their own individual experience that lets them, be creative in their own way. I mean, it's not like there were 10 great directors who followed the same path and became successful that way. And I'm not talking about story structure or whatever, but I'm talking about the people who became, and writer director. I like the idea of writer director a lot more, but it's like who followed that path over and over again. It's not like they had the same path. Every single director had their own individual and own significant path that was different from the next person. So yeah, I was just pointing that out. It wasn't necessarily like a hate thing, but it was like, well, you kind of have to be weary about that. And I'm going to have to be worried about that in my journey, because if I get too caught up in, oh, look how many views I have. Oh, I'm already getting this much feedback. Might as well stop. Well, you can have that mindset, but it won't really get you to your end goal of what you really wanted to accomplish. There's so many things in between this, long journey, that if you get caught up in a process in the middle, or whatever it is in your journey, it can become really, really difficult to kind of get back on track. So that's what I want to talk about today. I mean, LARPing is just a crazy thing in generation. I mean, before it was faking it till you make it, but now it's LARPing and being like, hey, I'm living this life. And I'm not talking about those people on social media who post like pictures of themselves like in a car and be like, hey, mama, I made it. I'm not talking about that. I mean, those people can live whatever lives they want to. But I was more talking about the fact that you can LARP being a director, or you can be an actual director. And it's funny for me. It's funny coming from me because I haven't really directed anything. And sure, one could argue that my initiative towards wanting to make something is a little bit better than what another person would say, but it's a little bit insignificant compared to. That's why comparing work, it's a slippery slope. It's a really slippery slope. So that's the video. Yeah.